Okay, I've got 1 o'clock. We ready?
You bet.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and call this meeting in order. Roll call, please.
Todd Kimmelshoe.
Here?
Matt Conant.
Here.
Bo Shepherd.
Here.
Wade Kirchner.
Here.
Charlie Hoppin.
Yeah.
Mike Morris.
Here.
Chris Schmidl.
Yep.
Drew Stresser. Sean Harris. Thank you.
Will everyone please stand? Public comment. Members of the public will be allowed to address the Sutter Butte's Flood Control Agency's Board of Directors on items of interest to the board that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. Any member of the audience who may wish to bring a matter before the board that has not been placed on the agenda may do so at this time. However, state law provides that no action may be taken on any item not appearing on the posted agenda.
Here he comes. Two of them.
Welcome. Consent calendar. The consent calendar groups together those items which are considered non-controversial or for which prior policy direction has been given to staff and that require only routine action by the board. The chair will advise the audience that the matters may be adopted in total by one motion. However, the board may, at its option or upon request of a member of the public, consider any matter separately. Do I have a motion?
Comment second.
So I have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Can you clarify who's second?
Whatever.
Thank you.
Well, get him here in a meeting.
Okay. Todd Kimmelshoe.
Here? I mean, yes?
Matt
Can't do
Conant.
two things at
I
once.
know it.
Matt Conant.
Aye.
Bo Shepherd. Wade Kirchner.
Aye.
Charlie Hoppin.
Aye.
Mike Morris.
Aye.
Chris Schmidl. Drew Stresser. Sean Harris. Bill Conley.
Aye.
Black Bear Gog.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Presentations, discussion, and action items. Number 4, direction to proceed on the Lower Feather River Phase 2 Levy River Repair Project.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll take on that item. So, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. So, this is the item that we discussed in detail last month. We discussed both this Lower Feather River West Levy Phase 2 project and also a project along the Sutter Bypass. So this month we're focusing in on the Feather River West Levy Phase 2 project. So this is the project identified in red here. It's approximately 1.6 miles. It lies in between the Highway 99 bridge and the Sutter Bypass. This is an area that was originally part of our Feather River West Levy project as a whole, and this is the only section of the system along the Feather River that has yet to be repaired. So we would like to move forward on this project. We're anticipating a cutoff wall project, 45, 50 feet deep approximately, so it's well within conventional method means. This would be a locally led project, so SBFCA would initially fund the design and permitting for this project, and we would seek additional funding for future construction. This project to design and permit will take approximately 2 years once we get going on it. So we have existing plans at about a 30% design level, and we would need to take them up to a 65% design level. We would be able to use those plans to initiate the 408 approval process through the Army Corps. That takes a long time. So we anticipate 2 years from start to finish, roughly. So we would be looking at construction in approximately 2024 if we get the green light to get going on this project. This is an area also that LD1 is anticipating trying to annex. This is part of MA3, Maintenance Area 3, and LD1 would like to annex MA3 into their district. And this would help eliminate or reduce a lot of risk if they were to successfully annex that project. Next slide, please. This is a little difficult to read, I understand, but this is cut and pasted directly from the staff report. And these are the reasons, we talked about this last month, why advance this project now? Why advance this project along with the Sutter Bypass East Levy at the same time? So I put together these list of reasons for advancing the project. First and foremost, both of these areas have been identified as critical repair sites. So they've always been on our list to go after as soon as possible. SBFCA has the funding to advance both these projects. We'll be partnering with the state on the Sutter Bypass. This would be a locally led effort, as I just discussed, and we have the funding to advance both of these projects at the same time. If we were to do that in 2 years from now, approximately, we would have 2 projects ready for construction. So we would be during that 2 years time, we would be seeking additional funding for future construction, lining things up so that we're ready to build the project once the designs are ready and all the permits are in hand. We also want to lock in design costs. As everyone is aware, costs are creeping up. There's a lot of inflation happening. We'd like to get these projects into design and permitting, utilizing a lot of our existing consultants, locking in our costs now, and be ready for construction in 2+ years. Like I said earlier, the Lower Feather River project, this 1.6 miles, we've taken this, our team has taken this design to approximately a 30% level. So we're ready to hit the ground running to take this to the next step and get plans completed within 2 years. Our Director Huppen had a great question last month about what if there was a relief cut needed in the future, if there was a flood emergency and a relief cut needed to be put in place. And the answer to that is that relief cut could simply be made along the lower Sutter Bypass East Levy, just upstream from what would be our newly completed Feather River West Levy project. So this wouldn't be a throwaway cost or anything like that. This would be really good money spent protecting people and property. And then lastly, this is in line with our strategic plan. We believe this is the best way to advance the strategic plan at this time and protect our people and property within the community. Next slide, please. Just to quickly highlight, this is the same slide as last month, just to remind the board what the costs are approximately. We believe the design and permitting will be right around $1.9 million. What I'm seeking today is direction from the board to reach out to our design and environmental teams, negotiate task orders, and bring those task orders back to the board for approval. So today is providing direction to staff, and then we would bring back task orders for authorization next month. And then we would target construction in 2024, as I previously mentioned. Next slide, please. This is the last slide. So just to remind the board that the agency has the money available. We have, once our bills are all paid by DWR, reimbursements for Feather River West Levy project costs, we anticipate having roughly $25.5 million in our bank. We're also working closely with City of Yuba City, who have collected development impact fees, and they've collected right around $1.7 million that they could transfer over to SBFCA, and I'm working closely with the city manager. And there's other potential funding sources as well that would add to our budget. So we have the money to advance this project. So that's what this slide is all about. And that is the presentation for this item. Mr. Chairman, I want to turn it back to you and see if there's questions from the board.
So are there any questions from the board?
Michael, do you need a motion for your proceed with your task order?
I do. So this would be a recommendation that the board direct the executive director to proceed, reach out to our team, and bring back task orders to the board for next month for authorization.
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a first and second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Todd Kimmelshoe,
Yes.
Matt Conant,
Aye.
Bo Shepherd. Wade Kirchner,
Aye.
Charlie Hoppin. Mike Morris,
Yes.
Chris Schmidl.
Yes.
Drew Stresser. Sean Harris. Bill Conley. Black Bear Gog.
Yes.
Bruce Johnson is online. And Mike Ziegenmeyer. Thank you.
So it looks like the motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chair, can I ask one quick question? Can you go back to the map on that real quick and just show me where that relief point would be? If that was, I was just curious.
I don't have a laser pointer, but I can
Okay.
hopefully talk it
All right.
through here once the map gets back up. So if you look at the end of the red line on the left, that's where it would tie into the Sutter bypass. So if you just project that to the north, that's where potentially a relief cut could be made, or further upstream where it would make sense. You probably wouldn't want to do it right next to the completed levee, but upstream a bit along the Sutter bypass.
Okay, it would be more on the Sutter, obviously on the Sutter.
It would be on the Sutter bypass, correct?
And that would go, and there's not much, if that had to happen, there's not a lot of dwellings or,
No, there's
none out that
no
way.
dwellings
Okay.
down there. No, it's all ag land.
all right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Informational and possible approval items, agenda item number 5, presentation and file monthly financial report.
Okay. Hey, good afternoon, Chair Kirchner, members of the board. My name is Seth Warzel with Larson Warzel and Associates. This is your regular monthly update. Oh, thank you, Tara. I think I can advance this slide with this. Just hit that. Oh, that works. Look at that. Okay, so just working through the report that you received in the today from Yuba City. That was not available at the time the board packet was put together, but we provided copies at the in the vestibule there and on the dais. But the working capital that we have through this is your report through month ending January 31st, about 14.2 million, and then taking into consideration accrued revenues and expenses. The estimated fund balance to date combined is about 21.07 million. The revenue that we've received for 21-22 to date is about 250,000, and our for operating, and the capital revenues about 12.2 million, taking into consideration all of the pending payments that we have with the state. The difference between the 2.7 at month ending January and our 2.2 is about 9 million. This is summarized here. The 9.1 million is a combination of state payments that are pending. The list is available here, and you can kind of see we've got a lot of pending payments on all of our different grants with the Wildlife Conservation Board, CDFW, Natural Resources, and DWR. But there's about 5.4 million of pending state payments and about 3.8 million of revenue that we've received after January 31st, received in February. That's the first apportionment of our local assessments. And so you can see the difference in working capital is all that money that's waiting to come in. With respect to our expenditures to date, about 4.7 million for 21-22. The table here shows the breakdown of where we spent our money this year so far, primarily on the completion of the sediment removal project, and then a little bit on OWA, the combination of the various work under the UFA project, UFA grant, and other funding sources. And that was work primarily at the end of last year, end of the last construction season, beginning of this fiscal year. Our financing, our next debt service is due in in October, 10/1. The 10/1/2021 was completed in last September. The next debt service is April of this year. And I believe we've issued that check earlier this month. And so we're all paid up for this year, 21-22 fiscal year debt service. So that's completed, and our next debt service will be in October of this year. That should have said the 10/1/21. Sorry about that, on that error on the slide. So with respect to our bond issuance, we've filed our annual continuing disclosure report. Encourage everybody who's interested in Sutter Butte's debt to go on to the EMA website. So this is the Electronic Municipal Market Access website. That's where information regarding municipal securities is disseminated to the investing public. This is a copy of the document that was posted along with our financial statements, emma.msrb.org, so you can go and see all about our debt there. So that completes this year's cycle of reporting for fiscal year 21-22. Well, actually, that's year ending fiscal year 2021. So that's all behind us now. The next steps are for us to work with Wildan, our assessment engineer, on the 2022-23 assessment process. So in terms of work that we've got ongoing, as I mentioned, we're working through a lot of payments with our granting agencies on our UFR agreement and Wildlife Conservation Board. We're closing out our UFR agreement by the end of this calendar year. That's our Feather River West Levy project grant. We're making our final requests for release of retention and final payment requests. We have, like I said, a December 2022 deadline. We expect to get that closed out well in advance of that deadline. And that will help bring up that balance in our capital fund to that $25.5 million mark that Michael mentioned would have available once we get all the receipts and payments in from our granting agencies. The other financial activities we have is supporting the FRALIFA assessment, the Feather River West Levy Financing Authority assessment, working with the member agencies on implementing the regional levy impact fee that the board provided direction to us last year on, and then coordinating with DWR on the Sutter Bypass East Levy project and funding on that, and assisting with the financial plans and preparing the budget addendum that'll come to the board next month with respect to the Lower Feather River Phase 2. That project is not reflected in our budget. When we bring those task orders that Michael mentioned during his last item back to the board, we'll be bringing in a budget addendum so that the board can see how that project fits into our overall budget. So that concludes my presentation. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer it at this time.
Bring it back to the board for any questions. Seeing none, we'll move to agenda item number 6, presentation and file program project update.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, that'll be me. Once the presentation gets loaded up, I will start. Okay, so this is our program project update for March of 2022. Next slide, please. So as Seth talked about in the financial report, we are closing out the Feather River West Levy Project 1. We still have some ongoing work, and I keep, bringing these items up to the board every month, giving you updates. We're very close on both of these items. The first bullet, environmental and cultural resources mitigation. So we're wrapping up a cultural resources mitigation report for up in Butte County. Once that is completed, we will be submitting that to the Army Corps for finalization. And we're working very closely with our regulatory partners on the mitigation sites through the environmental process and getting those sites, which we utilize for mitigating valley elderberry bushes for the beetle. And we'll be turning those over for the Sacramento Conservancy to take those on. We're still working with the Army Corps on the operation and maintenance manual updates. That process is going slower than we liked, but we're getting good traction now. We have a monthly meeting with them to keep them on track for reviewing our work and getting it approved up their chain. They have a lot of review cycles internally at the Army Corps, but we're making good progress. We also are working with our member land use agencies to take the proper actions to comply with Senate Bill 5 with our 200-year certification. Land use agencies need to file a resolution to be in compliance with SB 5. So we're working with all of the agency staff on that. Still closing out a few real estate acquisitions. There's a couple left over that we're finalizing. Those are getting near to completion. One new item that came up here, Second Street encroachments. So I wanted to highlight this to the board. This has been a long-standing item. Second Street here in Yuba City, a lot of those properties abut the levee, and there's a lot of encroachments that we have been working with the landowners on. And the good news is, working closely with the Central Valley Board and the Army Corps, we're able to permit the encroachments that are out there as opposed to having them removed. So the property owners, I think, are going to be very happy with this approach. We're setting up a public meeting, property owner meeting later this month. It'll be on the 29th. We're going to hold it at Levy District 1's office so the property owners can just walk there if they wanted to. We're going to, as part of this encroachment permit process, we're going to do some vegetation clearing and some fence installations and or just gate installations to allow Levy District 1 to have access during a high water event to those properties because they're so close to the levee. So we got to have visual access from the top of the levee and to be able to get access onto those properties if needed. So that project, we're starting the design process on that. It's going to be a relatively small project, but we're putting a set of bid documents together. We'll bid that out to fencing contractors and vegetation clearing contractors to clean up that area and bring it into compliance with current standards. So that's an ongoing project that we're taking on. And then lastly, on the Army Corps periodic inspections, we're trying to get the results of that inspection out of the Army Corps. It takes a while for them to, once they've completed those inspections, which they did last year, but to write up the reports, that takes a while. So Chris and I are working closely with Central Valley Flood Protection Board staff and also the Army Corps to get the results of those inspections. We already talked about FurLip 2, so I'm going to move over to the next slide. And this is my last slide. So this is a lot of the ongoing work we have happening here. So under the DWR Small Communities Grant, that's the existing grant we have, we did a lot of work on identifying the problems for the small communities of Sutter and Tudor. And we're working closely with DWR to fund some critical repairs along the Sutter Bypass East Levee. And as we discussed last month, the board organized an ad hoc group that worked with staff to come up with our cost share to propose back to DWR because DWR is going to fund a majority of the design and permitting costs for those critical repairs, but the local agency has to cost share in that process. So we had a positive meeting earlier this month with DWR. They identified that they have $4 million committed to this project. So SBFCA will fund the balance of the project, which could be upwards to $1.9 million. And that was the authority that the ad hoc group granted to staff to negotiate with. So next steps are Chris Fritz and I are working on finalizing the scope of work and the associated costs, and we're sending that back to DWR. Once both sides are in agreement on the scope and the costs, we'll put those into a funding agreement, and that'll come back to this board for approval. I'm hoping we can bring back an agreement for your contemplation and hopefully approval sometime later this summer. I'm thinking June. We're hoping for June. if that takes place then we should be under contract several months after that because it has to go through the Department of General Services. So in an ideal world, by the end of the summer, we'll have an active funding agreement and ready to begin design and permitting of the Sutter Bypass critical repairs. And right now we're looking at like a 5.2 mile long project, basically centered at right where the Tisdale Weir comes into the Sutter Bypass. So that's great news. We're happy about that. We still have some small community grant money available, and we're utilizing that for environmental analysis and cultural analysis. So all of that work will feed into this process to advance the project. For Orville Wildlife Area, Robinson's Riffle Project, I'm happy to report we have 3 submitted grants now. So we submitted a state parks grant in January. We submitted a DWR grant in February, and then we just recently submitted a grant to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And so we're excited about that. So we have 3 grant opportunities to advance that Robinson's Riffle project. In the meantime, we have money through our RFMP grant, and we are doing some hydraulic modeling, so we are advancing the project with available money. So that's a real positive thing right now. Speaking of regional flood management planning, so we have an active round 3 grant. We're working closely with our Feather River regional partners, 3 Rivers, Yuba Water Agency, RD 1001, and the Marysville Levy Commission on all the projects that we as a region are pushing forward. Now, specifically for SBFCA, we're focusing utilizing grant money to advance Sutter Bypass work, a Cherokee Canal corridor management plan, which is kind of morphed into more of, we're not going to produce a corridor management plan now because DWR received over $20 million to do a pretty large maintenance project out there. So we're going to utilize this grant money to team up with DWR and help them advance that project. So to scope out the project and we'll participate in the design of that project to ensure that it moves forward. So that's a real positive thing. We're also advancing the Orville Wildlife Area, like I just mentioned. We're using this money, also this grant money, to participate in the water operation manual updates for both the New Bullards Bar and the Orville Dam. So the Army Corps is leading that effort. We are participating as a downstream, user. So we're utilizing grant money to participate in that project. I also wanted to highlight later this month, there'll be an Orville Dam Citizens Advisory Commission meeting. I'll be attending that in person. I'm sure Board Member Connolly will be there as well. And then lastly, for RFMP is the upcoming round 4 grant. So as part of our board meeting today on the consent calendar was a resolution for that project to submit a grant for the round 4 grant. And that's looking like a little over $300,000 for this initial round 4 funding that's going to be available to the Feather River region. And DWR is quickly going to follow up with a round 5 at approximately the same amount, a little over $300,000. So we're looking at combined 4 and 5 of about $630,000 for additional RFMP grant money. So we're excited about that. We'll be able to keep advancing these projects, and we're identifying some new projects as part of this round 4 grant. SBFCA is going to be the lead agency, and we'll be the one administering consultant contracts to advance this work. On the federal project, still working with the Army Corps to complete punch list work. It's been a long, drawn-out process, a painful process. It's taken way too long. Unfortunately, we're not the lead dog in this project. The Army Corps is, but we're pushing them as hard as we can to finalize these punch list items that work that was not completed to our satisfaction. So working closely with them on that. We're also, we took on the installation of the Levy District 1 fence and gate that was erroneously removed as part of that project. I'm happy to report that project is mostly completed now. So we're working closely with Drew Stresser of Levy District 1. We've installed a lot of the concrete blocks that are now going to protect and secure that area. The gates are going to be installed later this month, and then that project will be completed. And that's all part of our federal project. On FEMA remapping, Butte County map is completed, so happy to report that. We're working with our design team now to put the package together for the Sutter County map. And right now, we had a meeting yesterday with AECom, one of our consultants, and we're still waiting on the as-built drawings for the PL 8499 repair project that the Army Corps completed south of Laurel Avenue. That is going to take a little bit longer than we had hoped. We were hoping to submit our package in the summer. That could slide to late summer because of the holdup there, but we're going to keep pushing and get our work completed and be ready to submit when we can get that as-built drawing. And then lastly, regional development impact fee, just to inform our board that we're working closely with our land use agency members to implement a regional development impact fee as part of their fee packages for new development, so that new development pays its fair share into the SBFCA program. And so I'm working really closely with a lot of the staff of the members, and I'm pleased to report having really good dialogue with staff. And lastly, I just want to remind the board, we had some handouts this month. So we have a nice flyer for the Orville Wildlife Area project. So our state lobbyist helped put this together along with Chris Fritz. This highlights the project, all the good work that we've completed, and the work that we want to complete to expand upon the Orville Wildlife Area project. So we're utilizing this in our lobbying efforts to get grant money. We also, Tara put together a board calendar, so you have the calendar. Our board meetings are always on the second Wednesday of every month. Now, I do want to highlight next month in April, we're going to push it out 1 week to the 20th. We're finding that the week of the 13th is spring break for a lot of people, and I'm actually going to be out of town that week, or part of that week. I wouldn't be able to attend the board meeting on the 13th. So we're going to push it out 1 week to the 20th, and I hope that works for most of the board members. And then the other handout was the letter that our new chairman signed that we sent to Senator Nielsen and Assemblyman Gallagher requesting or their assistance in getting us funding for the sediment removal project. So in addition to applying for a CDFW grant, which we just did last Friday, we were asking the senator and the assemblyman to help us get directed general fund money for the project. So they've been big proponents of that project. They attended our groundbreaking. I spoke with their staffs. They're very much in favor of the project, so they're going to do everything they can to assist. So, Mr. Chairman, that is my presentation this month. I'll turn it back and see if there's questions.
I've got one question, a couple comments. First of all, on the Orville Wildlife Area, do we need all three of those grants to make this thing happen and complete the project?
No. So the State Parks grant is a separate grant. So that is to improve the existing boat ramp at the right near the Thermalito Afterbay outfall. And construct some campsites. So that's what that grant is specific to. The DWR grant and the CDFW grant, they're essentially redundant. If we get one, it essentially funds the work that we're looking to do. If we get both, it'll take it to another level. But those grants are looking more at expanding upon what we've already accomplished in the D unit. So we're looking to expand that into all the other units in the Orville Wildlife Area.
What are the chances of getting those grants?
Well, I mean, we've had really good dialogue with both the administrators at DWR and at CDFW. So, I mean, Chris and I are feeling pretty positive about each of them. we hope we land at least one.
And when will we know that?
They usually take 3 to 4 months after you submit the grant to hear something back, and that's what I would anticipate, probably this summer.
Good. I thought you were going to say 3 to 4 years.
No.
That's good to hear. And then on the FEMA remapping of Butte County, it's very interesting. On my way over here, I got a call from somebody in East Biggs. Just want to thank you, Todd, for all the work you put in to get that remapping done. So, I called him back and I took all the credit for it. I appreciate that very much. So I guess they've let all the landowners know in that area, or maybe if just these are the ones that are trying to do projects in the area. So I said, the next thing we need to do is make sure these flood insurance rates come down, which is a whole nother can of worms. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Through the chair, one quick question. Michael, where else have you identified the need for sediment removal on Butte and Feather River?
So we're targeting right at where the Yuba River comes into the Feather River, right at the confluence. There's a large island essentially right in the middle of the river that we've been targeting for sediment removal.
Have you looked at the Gridley area where the boat dock is, where Bruce had mentioned?
I don't know that we've looked at that yet. And I don't know, Chris, if you recall. Yeah, and actually, Bo, to answer your question too, to add on to Chris's answer, we're including that the Gridley wastewater pond site into our RFMP grant. So we're going to target some money for analyzing that area and working with city staff to pursue grant money to do some sort of project, whatever project is needed out there. So that's another positive use of this RFMP grant money.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
I just wanted to bring you up to date on the Citizens Advisory Committee at the dam. It's just an advisory committee, but we're somewhat ignored as citizens in the sense that if we try to establish something on the agenda, like we had Rune Sorensen come give a talk about the need for a complete study of outflows, meaning right now the only outflow study DWR has is a sunny day scenario where the dam completely collapses, therefore, 180,000 people get evacuated. I appreciate that we've written a letter of support from this committee, and we're trying to change it to where at least we can get answers for why they won't do that report. They've never completed a report as required by FERC that would take into consideration a partial collapse of the dam or just an extraordinary weather event and all that. And we're still pushing on him to fund Rune. He's willing to donate much of the work. He's got $85,000 and he needs a match of $85,000, which would impact everybody downstream, because this would be a study that would allow us only to evacuate those necessary uncertain outflows up to the maximum that was ever invented. The dam's supposed to take up to 400,000 cubic feet per second, if need be, over the emergency spillway. We've never been anywhere near that. It pressures the levees, as you guys know. If we're putting out 150,000 feet per second, it makes a big difference downstream. That starts pressuring levels. 200,000, there's going to be a failure. We want all the different scenarios to know what's going on, and we're pushing DWR to support that. And I'll just ask, maybe it's worth it to us to get with Rune and give him the $85,000 since he's donating much of his time. And for your information, he's at Berkeley, he's a professor, he's world renowned, he's called upon by governments to solve issues like this. Beyond that, again, we see the Citizens Advisory Committee needing to give us hard answers to, I don't know if you're aware, there's a tunnel that goes through there. It's 1,200 feet long. It's about halfway up the dam. The valve is on the downhill side, and it feeds a little ditch that runs out to Palermo. It's called the Palermo Canal, but it's really a ditch. Well, if you have 900 foot of water over 450 foot, it don't take a college professor to know that's a lot of head pressure, and it happens to be right under the green spot. So I'd kind of like to know that. We want to know what's going on with the gates. We know there's a need to rebuild the gates at the dam. That's everybody's safety downstream. There's no redundancy built in. The gates are at the end of their life. There's cracks up to 30 feet long, which they put spray paint on and, tell us not to worry. And I've got a whole other list that we're going to be asking through the Citizens Advisory Board, and we're going to ask them to allow us as citizens set some of the criteria without pushback from DWR, the water contractors, or whoever thinks they need to get involved. And so I just wanted to bring you up to date on those things and let you know we're still up there looking out for your safety downstream, and we got a ways to go. That's what I want to say. We got a ways to go. Oh yeah, I got to tell you one funny thing. So they have Rune does his report in front. They got the history of how safe California dams are and all this stuff. And then afterwards, he had this renowned worldwide expert up there telling us how safe your dams are in the United States, that the rest of the world emulates this and practices our practices and all this stuff. And you only got a 1 in 500 chance of something happened to your dam, and I'm sitting there, it's in a decade, you burned up a powerhouse, you ruined a river valve, and you broke a spillway and evacuated 180,000 people. Yeah, I feel safe. How about you? I didn't say it. I thought it. I'm saying it here.
We are world renowned.
I'm amazed you didn't say it.
Well, Crowfoot was there, and I was trying to be nice. He's way up the food chain. We were thinking maybe he'd help us some. So.
Any additional questions, comments by the board? Any from the public? Okay.
That's okay.
Hello, sorry. There was no agenda outside, so I didn't know which agenda item. I didn't fill out a card initially because I didn't know what was on the agenda, but I did want to talk actually about the Sutter Bypass East level. Is that all right? Thank you. Okay, so we had a meeting. I got one of those postcards in the mail that said, hey, SBFCA, right? Is that what? Okay. Was doing all of this stuff, so I went to one of the meetings that was at Berry School, and he was talking about grants at that time. And I kind of have a question. First, my name's Heather Esselman, so I live in Yuba City. And at that time, he didn't mention the 1.7 million that of development impact fees. And I'll get back to that, but he talked about the grants coming potentially from the state, and they're having a conversation with the state, and that there was some difficulty with them. Knowing that that area right now is being developed on the other side of the levee, so all of Natomas Basin is just exploding, right? You've got Cedar Point and all those other items there. So if you have two sides of a levee, one side of the levee starts to get worked on, the question is what the support side on the other side of the levee is going to be, and it's very clear that the state would have little interest in fortifying that side of the levee as it would and fortifying the other side of the levee because of all the construction that's going on right now. So I'm not sure how motivated the state would be to grant monies for that, if that makes sense. And then secondly, the $1.7 million of development impact fees, I was at the Yuba City meeting at that time and spoke to them about that, saying, what's going to happen to that? Because Yuba City, the city basically rejected refunding those monies because they felt that they had collected them incorrectly. I don't know if you remember the meeting. And the city at the time said that they're not going to refund those monies and that those are going to go to the levy district. So I'm not quite sure how, I'm assuming that's the same monies. I don't know. That because the 1.7 million was basically the amount that Diana Langley talked about at the time, not the city manager, but the head of that department. And so I'm not sure how that money didn't go to the levy district, because if I was somebody who had paid $1,000 as an impact fee and the city decided, well, we're going to keep it, we didn't really need to take it in the first place. And the fee that's being accrued right now is going to the levy district, I believe. So then why would they want to put the money or give the money to SBFCA so that SBFCA could do levy work in an area that does not even impact Yuba City, if that makes sense. So it's a worthwhile project. Totally think that it's a good idea. But if I was somebody who had paid that, if you're not going to give it back to me, then I want it to go to something that impacts me, and that doesn't impact me, if that makes sense. So I'm just a little bit disappointed that the Yuba City representation didn't bring up any of that during the discussion part, so particularly the vice mayor, but we've already had some discussions on him not speaking up as much as he probably should, so I think that's about. Oh, and also the strategic plan, I'm not sure what the strategic plan is around that area and how that impacts like whatever kind of development that's going on the other side. But anyways, okay, that was my question.
Yeah, I will, when the meeting's over, I'll be able to answer all your questions, if you have time.
You know, public comments can't be addressed at the board unless it's an item which they're discussing today. So, right, counsel?
The board is not permitted to take action on any non-agendized items. I sense that you have a bunch of questions that may be best answered by staff, and if you're not happy with those answers, then maybe come back next month and ask the questions directly to the board. But the public comment isn't really a good opportunity for a dialogue amongst a group of people. That's usually best scheduled as a workshop.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments by the board? Any from the public? Then I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Adjourned.
Funeral this morning?